What's up, guys? This is Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall markets. I'm going to break down why the market's trying to bounce in the after hours due to big tech earnings, and also why there's still some gaps left on SPY and the QQQ to get filled below, which could be affecting this overall setup. But just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link that's down below, or use my QR code right here to sign up. Moomoo is an amazing global brokerage that consists of many exclusive offers. If you sign up and deposit $100, you're going to get $20 of free Nvidia stock. If you deposit $2,000, you're going to get $50 worth of Nvidia stock. Deposits $10,000 to get $300 worth of Nvidia, or deposit $50,000 to get $1,000 of free Nvidia stock. You're also going to qualify for a 3.6% APY base rate plus a 4.5% APY extra for 3 months, making it a total of an 8.1% APY. This offer ends very soon, so please use my link down below to sign up, or use this QR code right here. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the overall market. So as far as the market's going, I just wanted to mention that so far, the market did see this head and shoulders like pen. We were talking about this in my morning video, and we did sell off all the way down to about $679 a share. That's almost a 10-point drop from the previous all-time high. Now, SPY is trying to bounce right now thanks to the earnings that just came out, so I'll talk about that in a second, and why it's very possible this bounce actually does help us push a little bit higher heading into tomorrow. But even if we do go higher, I'm going to be watching to see if we get a rejection, if we end up making a lower high to start dipping back down to fill some of these gaps. There's still lots of unfilled gaps left on SPY. There's one down at 677, another one down at 671.6. Those could get filled, and then we're going to be watching to see if we get a big November squeeze after that. On the triple Q, there's two gaps. There's one down here at 617, another one down here at 610. We're going to see if this tries to push first, if we try to retest the all-time high, if we break it or not. And then we're going to be watching to see if we get like a rejection. So I'll talk about the setups in just a couple of minutes. Let's first talk about the news that came out. And as a reminder, okay, this all starts off with Jerome Powell, and then we're going to talk about President Trump and what happened with his meeting with President Xi Jinping of China. What happened first was we had the Fed come out, and we have some very important Fed officials coming out, and they're saying that they think Jerome Powell is being more hawkish than they expected. I would say that he was kind of in the middle, but sure, I could agree with that point because he did say some hawkish things. So part of the reason why the market ended up dipping, at least when Jerome Powell was speaking, was because Jerome Powell caused the confidence in there being a December rate cuts to go down, because he said it depends on the data and a lot of different things. So I did go over the full details yesterday, so I'm not going to go over everything. That's part of why we ended up dipping, because there is, once again, no guarantee that the Fed is going to cut in December. They have to wait and see what happens with data and other global changes, right? We have to see what happens with unemployment, inflation, and factors just like that. Now, right now, there's about a 74% chance that we get some kind of December cuts by 25 basis points, and this will be adjusted depending on data. Before, this was in the 90% range. Now it's at 74%, which is part of why the market ended up dipping. It's not as confident as before. Jerome Powell also did say some things that were quite bullish for the market simultaneously, such as the fact that the Fed is going to be transitioning from quantitative tightening to quantitative easing to some extent, as they're going to be buying back lots of treasury bonds, which is their way of kind of like stabilizing and stimulating the economy. So they're indirectly going to be doing that, at least once we get to the December period. But I think that this is going to have a very profound effect on things, and that's why the market still remains bullish overall. Now, we did temporarily dip because of this, and then we also had other catalysts that caused the market to dip, such as, the big tech earnings from yesterday. We had Meta, Microsoft, and Alphabet caused us to sell off, and then there were two more things that happened that led to another sell-off and a bounce. So after Jerome Powell and all their earnings, we had one more big factor that involves President Trump and President Xi Jinping of China meeting up. What happened during the meeting? As a quick reminder, okay, President Trump said it was an amazing meeting. He said there was a lot of finalization. And when asked to rate the meeting on a scale from 1 to 10, President Trump gave it a 12. He said it was a 12. That's pretty amazing in his opinion. And he said that a lot of progress was made. Now, they did not necessarily sign a finalized agreement, but President Trump did say that a deal could be signed pretty soon, and that there were not too many major tumbling blocks that got in the way. So what happened? President Trump announced that The US is going to decrease its tariffs on China by 10%. And then China is going to help to improve other things. And then when it comes to other factors, there's also some news coming out that China is going to be delaying the export restrictions on rare earths. This was more bullish, but the market did price this in already. And then besides that, China is going to be buying more US soybeans, and then there's other things as well. However, what wasn't so good about this was that we did not see negotiations or any deal involving TikTok, Taiwan, or Nvda. And then when asked about this, President Trump said they did not talk about the Blackwell chips of Nvda. That was not actually discussed. So if we got a huge Nvidia deal, this could have had a very different effect in the markets. But because much of this was kind of like priced in, and I think that the meeting was productive, but it was not necessarily so insane to the point where we got this like wow factor that really moved the market. That's why the market ended up dipping after this meeting had come out. That's why we got this sell off today. That's part of the reason why we sold off. Much of this was already priced in. We didn't really get that wow factor. So now what's happening now to the markets? Why is the markets doing this? So what happened was since FOMC, the earnings from yesterday and President Trump's meeting with Xi Jinping of China, we saw SPY go from 689 a share all the way down to 679. We dumped almost 10 points. Okay, we got a sell off. That's kind of like where we ended up closing today with the big sell off. But then during the after hours, the market is now bouncing just a little bit because we got more earnings. We got Amazon, Apple, and Coinbase. Amazon and Apple are the two biggest earnings of the week, and they're doing very, very well. Amazon had better than expected earnings. We saw a big increase in the share price. Their EPS was at $1.95. That's beating expectations of $1.57. Their revenue is at $180 billion ahead of the $178 billion expectation. Their overall Amazon Web Services revenue was still quite strong, beating expectations. Good growth overall for the quarter. They also have strong demand in AI and core infrastructure, and their overall guidance was quite strong. So good job by Amazon. Great growth overall, and we're seeing price targets being raised from different analysts. Good job by Amazon. The share price is exploding. For Apple stock is up 5%. They beat on EPS and revenue. Their revenue is up 8% year over year at $102.5 billion, which is good news for them. They also predict that their Chinese revenue is going to continue to grow, and then they're looking for good sales for the iPhone 17 and such. So good job by Apple overall. The share price is up, but not as strong as like Amazon's. But because Amazon and Apple are both in the green, that's helping the market bounce. Coinbase also once again, they ended up topping expectations when it comes to their revenue and their EPS. And one thing worth mentioning is that Coinbase is like kind of flat, it's a little bit in the green. That's something else that's going on. Tomorrow is going to be a very important day, though, because it's the last day of October of 2025. It's also a Friday. You guys know that Fridays are known for manipulation. But remember, it's the last day of the month, and the last days of the month tend to be crazy because of the end of the month as it affects balance sheets. So in the morning, we have Logan giving a speech from the Fed. Then we have the Chicago PMI at 9:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Then we have Bostic from the Fed giving a speech, and that's pretty much it. I think that much of the data is going to be delayed when it comes to like PCE. Because of the government shutdown, which is unfortunately still going on. And that's pretty much it. It's going to be a very quiet data day, but here is something that's important. Look at the option chain. We have a 2.92 put to call option ratio. We have basically way more puts than calls expiring. And with that happening, I think that this may cause some volatility. Max Payne's also at like 670. So with all the puts expiring, sometimes we do see a lot of chop. The market may kind of like pump tomorrow morning, then chop around. And then we're going to see if we get some kind of rejection or not. But I would not be surprised if we close a little bit in the green. And then maybe once we start November, we see a different move. I would personally like the market to sell off a bit just to fill some gaps before we try to bounce again. Finally, the fear and greed index is currently at fear. We're going to see if that shifts. Momentum is just at greed. It's still holding up. The put to call option ratio is dropping, and then the VIX is also kind of flat, not really affecting us too much. So that's pretty much it for data. So with that being said, let's focus now on the charts. What do I see for the charts thus far? What do I think is going to happen heading into tomorrow? Well, let's just say that the market is hypothetically bullish, okay? And I'm not leaning in this direction, but let's just say we are bullish because the market is very tricky. You want to see us break very close to like 690. If SPY breaks 690, then yes, this is going to just eliminate the shorts and we're going to continue to rally. It's going to eliminate the head and shoulders and we're looking for new all-time highs. That's the bullish case. The bearish case is going to be that we kind of like pop and then we fill at 682 again. We're not that far from it, even like with the good big tech earnings. And if we don't hold 682 at the very least, I do see a risk of us dipping to 677 either tomorrow or by next week to fill the gap. And then we could continue to fall for the next gap fill. Now, the daily had a very, very weak close. We actually got a big rejection. The daily does favor these gap fills down here. But because of the big tech earnings, so just to show you guys what I'm talking about, what's happening is the market had a weak close, and then all of a sudden we got big tech earnings. Apple is currently up 2.76%. It popped a bit. It's holding up nicely. But what's really leading the market is Amazon, which is up about 13%. Amazon's on fire. We got a bullish rating from UBS, very, very strong earnings. And that's what's going to help the market try to push a little bit tomorrow morning. So that's the reason why we're gapping up and trying to push. I think we gap up tomorrow as a result of this. But here's the thing, okay? These gaps are still unfilled. We have not fully filled this gap yet at 677. We have not filled the gap back down to 672. And also the 672 gap fill aligns with the previous all-time high zone. So I would personally like us to test this before we try to go higher. And I think that there is a risk of us kind of like coming down to fill these gaps to start off November. And then we should turn back to bullish and push for $700 by the end of the year. So there might be a nice buying opportunity. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Let's take this one step at a time. What do I think is going to happen tomorrow? Now, I gave you guys the levels to watch for, right? Lose 682, we're bearish. Break 690, we're bullish. I think tomorrow we push a little bit in the morning with all the option expirations. And I think SPY is going to gap up and it's going to attempt to go for like 686 to 687. But I don't know if we take out this high. We might not take out this all-time high. We might come short of the all-time high. And then this could be forming sort of like an inverse cup and handle. So as we gap up tomorrow and try to pump, look for a temporary push, but then it could be followed by downside by the end of the day, if not by next week. And then this could eventually start dipping back down to fill the gap at 677. I think that would be very healthy. I think tomorrow we kind of like gap up and pump, and then we could consolidate, maybe slow down as the day goes on. We might still get a green close, so we might still close very close to where we are. But this could just be the market setting itself up for a weak start to November. I would like us to basically dump in November to start things off, but it's going to be a trap for bears. I would like to see us do something like this where we just dip and we've come back down to fill the gap, retest the previous all-time highs, and then we get ready for the big squeeze. And this will eventually get ready for the next leg up towards 700 to close off the year. I think that is what the market might be doing. I would like to see a move just like this. That is my prediction, but we'll see just to be safe. Now, for tomorrow, like I said before, we should try to gap up. We're going to try to go a bit higher. If we take out 690, we're bullish, but we might come a little bit short. And we might be testing 686 to 687. We might consolidate here. Then we could start to dip back down towards the lower 680s. So watch that very, very closely. And then don't forget there's a gap to fill at 677. So give this the time it needs. So what's my view of SPY? I think we gap up tomorrow. We try to go a little bit higher thanks to big tech earnings, but the move might not last forever. We might not take out the all-time high. We might come a little bit short. And I think that this could just be us getting ready for repositioning for the end of the month. And then we could be getting ready for a temporary bearish move for November to start things off, only for it to get followed by a big squeeze to finish the month. I hope that's as clear as possible. The QQQ is also pumping. It's trying to make a full recovery. I think it tries to go for all-time highs. Again, this is looking stronger than SPY. Now, if we hypothetically fail at 627.5, I think we easily come down to fill the gap. If we break 635, we're looking for an attempt for all-time highs, and then we could even break towards them. I would not be surprised if this gaps up and tries to go for the all-time high again, but it could be forming a double top here because there's some tough resistance near 635, and we might reject near there. And then I think once we start November, I would look to see if we get a rejection, come back down to fill this gap in the upcoming week. I think this is what the QQQ will likely end up doing. That's the most likely possibility. So watch your levels just to be safe. And if we end up breaking 638, then yes, we could just continue to go in and validate this bearish move. But I'm going to be looking to see if we form a double top. Keep in mind, we're going to form another gap. So that's the 3 gaps on the QQQ, meaning that tomorrow, right, we gap up, we try to fill this gap over here back to 635, but then we're going to gap up. There's going to be one gap right here where my cursor is. Okay, there's another gap over here at 617, another gap down here at 610. So I would like to see us fill those gaps before we go higher. So keep in mind and be very careful as we're going to gap up tomorrow. For the IWM, we're showing some weakness on the daily, but it might follow the trend on SPY and the QQQ. It also has a gap to fill down here at 600, sorry, not 600, 238. There's a slight divergence here. Now, if we end up losing essentially 242, we're looking for a big dump. If we break 248, we're looking for a bounce. I would not be surprised if we rebound for 246 and then continue to consolidate before we start dipping back down to the lower 240s. We might be looking for a temporary retest of our EMAs before this thing ends up continuing to fall. And I think sometime in November, early November, we're going to return to fill this gap over here. And then the second gap way down here at 238 for some temporary downside. And then that's going to be another buying opportunity. For ES, notice that we're consolidating near 6,900. We didn't fully fill this gap yet, so there is still some downside risk for ES. And then if you look at, for example, I'm not sure if the daily time frame shows this. I guess it does show it. There is still this big gap over here that's unfilled. So just like SPY, it's the same setup essentially. We have this head and shoulders like top. And I think that we could attempt to gap up tomorrow, try to go a little bit higher, and then we're going to be looking to see if we get a rejection. If we take out the all-time high, of course, we can remain bullish. If not, there's going to be a risk of 68.55 or below to fill this gap. And this is going to be another buying opportunity. Once again, we could just see this as a buying opportunity before we try to see a big bounce. And we could be looking for a big rally heading into November just like that. So keep that in mind. This could be another buying opportunity. NQ is showing more strength than SPY right now, but don't forget, we still have a big gap at 25,500. I think there's a good chance we fill that in November to start things off, but we'll see just to be safe. Now, we could pump a little bit. We could be looking for 26,300. As long as we don't break past 26,400 to invalidate this head and shoulders, there's a good chance it kind of like consolidates here, then starts to dip again. Look for a pump tomorrow and some consolidation. We'll see if we take out the all-time high or not. If not, I'm gonna be looking for like a move like this, where we just pump and dump, and then we get ready for a temporary dip for November to fill that gap. That's where I lean towards. Unless we break this all-time high, we'll see how it goes. Bitcoin's trying to bounce. You have a double bottom right here that's forming, so this is a nice setup for Bitcoin to bounce to fill this imbalance towards 109 to 110,000, and then we're going to see if it rejects one more time. I'll be watching that very closely. Tesla, same thing, same setup. It's almost identical. This also is almost like a head and shoulders on Tesla. I think we bounce tomorrow on Tesla for 450 or so, maybe a little bit higher. And then we're going to see if it rejects. If we take out 455, we could be going back up towards these highs. But if we come short, I would like to see Tesla reject and fill the gap at 433 at the very least, maybe even go lower. That would be very, very healthy for Tesla. And then once we approach the end of the year, this could be getting ready for another big bounce right back up to continue to develop this accumulation and then try to form a cup and handle. That's what Tesla could be doing heading into November. November is also a very bullish month for Tesla, but we might start off November on a weak start before we see something else. Nvidia is bouncing a little bit, but it depends, right? One problem with Nvidia is that even though it's been pumping, which is great, look at all these gaps. There's so many gaps left. There's a gap down here that has not been fully filled at 201. There's a gap down here at 191. There's a gap down here at 186, 182. There's too many gaps, which does not make me, it makes me uncomfortable to be buying it at these very, very high levels, unless we get some kind of like pullback. But we'll see just to be safe. So look for a bounce tomorrow for 208. Then look for 198 as our main support if that fills us. We're looking for that potential gap fill back down towards the lower 190s, and we'll see if we bounce or not. There might be a temporary dip coming. Tomorrow, though, look for a bounce for 208, and we'll see if we get a rejection for another move. Apple's pumping very nicely. Look at 280 is our resistance. If that breaks, we're looking for 285, hitting all-time highs and surpassing a $4 trillion market cap, which is absolutely insane. Good earnings from Appl, right? Especially with the Chinese sales getting a lot of relief. We look more bullish. We're doing well so far, and I think we gap up tomorrow, so we'll see how well we could hold above 280 or not. Netflix is bouncing, looking for a temp for 1137. It was due for a bounce thanks to the double bottom. MSTR is temporarily bouncing, looking for 272. Celsius has a nice looking divergence. Might see a temporary bounce for 60. I'm sorry, 60.8 to 61 before it rejects. There's a gap to fill on Supermicro back down to 48. It might bounce temporarily for 52 before it rejects and comes back down, in my opinion. Palantir is looking decent. It's trying to bounce here. It might retest 198. But then don't forget that despite that, there's still this unfilled gap. Even if it does bounce a little bit, it might bounce for 198 to 200 before it turns back down to fill this gap at 189. Rivian might be dipping back down towards 12.75, and we'll see if it bounces. SoFi, we're going to go back to the 4 hour. It's temporarily bouncing with the big tech earnings. It's holding 29, which is a good sign. It could be pushing for 31. And then we're going to see if it makes another lower high. A dip would be very, very healthy after all the upside. AMD is bouncing for 260 to 262. We might bounce and then retest 255. We'll see if that holds. Look for a temporary move up. ARM is favoring 171, and we'll see if it rejects. Look for some temporary upside. PayPal could be retesting 69.8, and we'll see how it goes for a temporary move up. Coinbase just had earnings. It needs to break 346 to be more bullish. Might test that, and we'll see if it rejects or not. Amazon's up 13%. We're going to see if this continues to pump for 255 or not. There is some upside potential. Meta has a nice wick forming here, and we're going to be looking for an attempt for 680 plus, and we're going to see if it rejects. There is some upside potential nonetheless. Google's making higher lows here. It could be retesting 287 or above for a temporary move up before it ends up turning. Microsoft is making higher lows here. Might retest 529, and we'll see how it turns. Oracle's looking quite good, looking for an attempt for 265, and we'll see if it rejects. I do see a small bounce as well. So the whole market's kind of like bouncing in the after hours, but it could be another trap because we're going to be forming another gap tomorrow morning, most likely. The VIX kind of has like a cup and handle, but we're going to see if it can reclaim 17.5. It has not done that yet. The dollar is also starting to bounce a bit with FOMC. Same thing with the 10-year after what Jerome Powell said about the overall cuts, right? We're not too sure about December. And then crude is not really doing much. It's dipping a bit, so it's not too bad. So what's my view of the markets? I think we gap up tomorrow. We try to pump again, but this might be another trap because there's still so many gaps left on SPY and the QQQ. We're going to have 3 gaps very close to where we are below on each of the charts. As we gap up tomorrow, that's going to be 1 gap. Then there's 2 more left on SPY and the QQQ. So could we pump? Yes, but then we're going to be watching to see if we make another rejection right before we break the all-time high. So be ready just in case. But plan B is in case we break the all-time highs, then yes, you want to remain risk off and be very careful just in case. But that's what I'm seeing so far, right? That's my essential assessment right now. We're going to be looking for a temporary gap up and a pump before we see another rejection. Don't forget, tomorrow is going to be the last day of the month, the last Friday of October 2025. It's also Halloween. And simultaneously, we have lots of option expirations, so expect some manipulation, at least to some extent. All right, so get ready for that gap up, a little bit of a pump tomorrow, but then this could be followed by another rejection as we head into the November period. Okay, so be very careful. And I'm not saying November is going to be bearish. I'm simply saying that it would be very healthy if we start off with a temporary dip for November, and then we see a massive bounce later on as we head into the end of November. That's my view. All right, so I'll talk more about that later on. Thank you all so much for listening, and peace out.